introduce you to Frank Kovacs. Frank is the founder and sitting president of The Breakfast Club, New Jersey. And so, Frank, it's your meeting.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to The Breakfast Club, New Jersey. As many of you know, The Breakfast Club was formed this October, will be 20 years ago. We founded the group following the 9/11 tragedy, and the purpose was to help those individuals that had lost their positions due to the tragedy. Soon after that, the need for the group continued due to various economic and financial crises that the country had gone through, and now, most recently, the pandemic. Along the way, as social media during that time came into being, we've tried to leverage it to the greatest extent possible to really help our individuals with key aspects of job search. So one big example is on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn group. The reason we have that group is because we have a average profile of our members is that they've been working for 20 years. They've had multiple employers, all within a concentrated geography, primarily between Philadelphia through New Jersey to New York City. And with that, it's a key aspect of job search to be able to get to a hiring manager and get a recommendation to them, which is probably the greatest way to raise up the probability of success when pursuing a specific job. So given the volume of members that we have in that key concentrated geography, the probability of success in finding somebody that either worked at one of those firms, works at it now, or knows somebody there is very high. And that, is a key critical factor to helping you get that referral in. The way people join the Breakfast Club is to simply go to our website, thebreakfastclubnj.com, and follow the instructions that are there on the site. You supply some key contact information, and from there, within a few days, you'll get a invite back that you're accepted. Shortly thereafter, our moderator for our LinkedIn group, Aresh Kaswani, will normally send out a LinkedIn invite so that you can join our LinkedIn group. Once you join the group, you still have to connect to each of the other members individually. But, many of our members have been networking for quite some time. So some have, networks as large as 30,000, first level contacts. So it's a great way for you to grow that network very quickly. In addition to that, we have a Facebook group. The Facebook group is important to join as well because, there's 5 times as many people on Facebook as there are on LinkedIn. So when you're trying to reconnect with people you used to work with, people you may have gone to school with, it's a much greater reach into individuals in order to be able to connect with them. We also use Meetup extensively. And Meetup has been a great blessing in that what we can do with Meetup is keep you informed. It automatically sends out reminders of when the meetings are going to occur, who's the presenter, what is the topic that the presenter will be speaking to at the meetings. But it also has a lot of great networking aspects to it. Number one, it gives you a list of all the people that RSVP'd to attend the meeting. And if you wanted to follow up with someone, many times there's both an avatar or a picture as well as the person's name. So if you can remember one or the other, it's usually a great way to be able to zero in and connect and follow up with those individuals. So definitely, even if you've been a member for some time, please RSVP so that you'll get that type of meeting and be able to leverage it to help you in your networking. We have Alex on the phone today. Alex, as he had said during some of the discussion before the start of the group, is a networking coach, a career coach. One of the things he has is a website called landingexpert.com. On that site, if you go to the networking area, you'll find a list of most of the networking groups in the tri-state area. It's probably one of the most comprehensive listings that exists. I strongly suggest that you go there, look at the groups. There's groups based upon every type of demographic, based upon profession, based upon industry, based upon geography. So look through those groups and really find additional groups as well that you could be attending that will help you in your job search. One of the key factors when one's in job search that helps them land is to maximize the amount of networking that you can do. And also, in light of the earlier conversation, definitely due to the pandemic, most of these groups are operating as we are right now via a virtual meeting, and it's much easier to get into all those different meetings because of the elimination of the travel time in order to attend. So again, this group is here to help you. You'll always see that we have a great balance of alumni that have gone through the Breakfast Club program and have landed here to help you every month. So if you are new to the group, just reach out to the individuals and they'll all help you. David Shuckman and Jerry Payton, who are here today, run our presentation committee. Adrian Roman runs our meetup and our Facebook. Alex has been a strong member of the group for many years. John Sampson runs even outside groups beyond the Breakfast Club. So there's a lot of different individuals here that you could call on that will help you and help you get your bearings, especially, if you're new to job search or, even if you've been in it for a while and, may be missing some key aspects of it. There people are here to help you. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Jerry Payton. Jerry will introduce our speaker and our presentation for today, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. Yes, we have a terrific presentation for you today. A great presenter, which I'm going to introduce right now. Colleen Ferrary is an experienced leadership coach. During her 23 years in corporate America, she rose to a director-level position in a Fortune 500 company. Her responsibility included a $900 million market responsibility and as many as 5,000 employees. She was called on to train at the corporate level, where she led training programs for as many as 25,000 executives and team leads. Today, Colleen still works with corporate executives, but is also the founder and guiding principal of Small Business USA. She currently supports leadership training, career readiness, and interview training for CUNY, RealWorks, Ghetto Film School, and the cities of New York and LA. I'd now like to introduce Colleen. Colleen?
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. So I like to say Small Business USA is my baby, but Employment Tutors is my passion. For years I have been growing and building businesses, and one of the things that we know no matter where you go is that business starts and ends with great people, and helping people achieve their dreams is a really important piece of what we do. So today what I'd love to do is kind of go through and talk about the whole, everybody can see this slide, right?
Yes.
Great. So, one thing that's really been eye-opening to me is I've worked with a lot of nonprofit groups, and Small Business USA does a lot of HR consulting. So that means that we go into these companies that are growing 150, 200 employees strong. They're generally high-tech startups, fast-paced, fast-growing companies. We have a lot of relationships with insurance companies and the film industry. So they're really tough to get into companies. And so we do a lot of hiring. And because we do a lot of hiring and working with interns and students, we have quite a few, as Jerry was kind of introducing me, we have quite a few relationships with nonprofit organizations, and we really help with the career readiness. And one of the things that has really changed over the past 5 years, and I'm, I've been in this, 35 years I've been in this field and working with teams and people, and 10 years in the space of hiring. The last couple of years has changed tremendously with how we go about just driving business and finding new talent, right? Just even this environment is really different and impressive, right? So what I'd love to do before we start with like an open Q&A is that I'd really like to kind of go through a couple things that you may or may not already know, but hopefully I'm going to make you think about changing your perspective a little bit. So anybody, I'm sure, the problem with this sharing is I cannot necessarily see all of you as I'm doing it. So stop me. And, I need to hear, if you have a question, please just speak up so I can hear you. So anybody who tells you that there is this glut of jobs that can't be filled are not talking right now about experienced labor. Today, like last week, we posted a position for a company and still got close to 1,000 resumes. So this unskilled labor, that's a whole different conversation. There's tons of those positions. But when you look at skilled labor, like most of you on this call are, we're still receiving hundreds of applications and resumes for every single job out there. So as you guys know, when you start this whole resume search, you're starting somewhere here at the bottom, right? Your resume, if you just send out a resume to a company, it starts here, right at the bottom. And there's a whole bunch of different steps. So the challenge that I'm going to ask you all today is, things have changed, and we'll go through a few of those changes and different levels, but I want you to really ask yourself, in your career search, the most important question is, where is your strategy stalling? So is it stalling? We have it 4 different buckets. Is it the pregame? Are you building connections and making relationships that are going to get you that dream job or going to make you the right connections? Many people have hundreds and thousands of connections and they're not the right connections. So are you stalling during the pregame? Are you meeting the right people to help you get a job? The second place where we see people stall often is on paper, the resume. So when you get your resume to the right people and there's something missing and you don't get that call. So if you're sending out a ton of resumes and you're not getting a call back, you're stalling at the on paper section. If you're getting the call and you're getting that pre-screening or initial interview, but you're not getting called after that, we call that at hello. That's that moment where there's an opportunity with the conversation that you're having with that pre-screener that we need to work on. And then lastly, the last one's at culture. That's that formal interview and negotiation phase. And each single one of these phases requires a little bit of a different skill set. So that's what we're really hoping to kind of dig in a little bit today, is where are you stalling and how can we help you, or how can I help you kind of re-energize your search and focus on only the problem, not everything. I mean, we could go in 1,000 different directions with a career search and just work really hard after the place that you're stalling. So when you are stalling in one of those spots, the biggest question I want you to ask is why? Why are you stalling? So let's dig into that a little bit, and I'm going to try to get through again really quickly so we can open it up to questions. But I'm going to go through those 4 different sections and what the most common mistakes we see are. The first one is that networking. So many people will network and network and network and network, and even in our we do these group coaching and networking events, and we really challenge you to really focus on the degrees of separation between you and your dream job. And you guys have all heard of Kevin Bacon, right? Like the 6 degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon? Well, I want to share something with you. It's all of us. We are all only separated by the people we want to know by no more than 6 degrees. It's not just Kevin Bacon, it's all of us. So we need to figure out, if you're stalling in this network space, you need to figure out how to network more effectively. And that's by figuring out where you are and where are the people that are decision makers for the jobs that you want. And then filling the gap in between. And that first connection, and I think this is a major, major mistake that networkers make, that first step is finding someone who knows you and believes in you to facilitate the next introduction. Too often, we cast our net so wide and we're not building key and core relationships with people who are going to promote us along the way. So as you're looking at your networking strategy, and if you know the right people, as you go through the steps to finding the people who are at the right hand of that spectrum, who are decision makers for the job that you want, just ask yourself, do you have the first step down? And are you being strategic about how you're building relationships to get there? The other question we ask is it the way, then in the next step on paper and in networking, are you marketing yourself well? And this is, for whatever reason, this slide resonates with so many people because there's 350 different brands in the average grocery store of shampoo, or Target or Walmart, right? 350. That's about how many resumes on average a company will receive for every job that you're applying for. So when you look at that aisle, right, they all do the same thing. They all wash your hair, right? So if a hiring manager is getting 350 resumes of people who all know how to wash hair, what about your resume is making you stand out so you can get to that next level? So I'm going to give you a really quick example. I'm applying for a job of employment coach, right? Something I do. But I'm going to have you take a look at my resume really quickly, and I want to hear it because I can't see. So I want to hear you. I want you to honestly rate me on a scale of 1 to 10 based on my resume that I'm going to show you and my ability to teach this class. So here's the first resume I'm going to show you. I just want to hear some numbers. 3, 5, 10. What score would you give me?
I think you're asking, it's okay that we unmute.
Yeah, unmute, and yeah, I want to hear it. I want to give me some honest assessment. You're hiring for an employment coach. This is the resume that you're handed. On a scale of 1 to 10, how qualified is Colleen Ferrary to be your employment coach?
I guess not a lot of people have reviewed employment coach resumes.
Well, you probably all work with employment coaches, right? Alex is a great employment coach. So, if you looked at this resume, David, be my guinea pig. What would you give me? A score of 1 to 10 based on this particular resume?
Sounds like someone else chiming in. Yeah, there, George.
It's George. So if this is about employment, I don't see, I see pieces of things around employment, but I don't see specifics to employment. If I had to word it that way.
Exactly. Maybe a 2, maybe a 3. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, I would say probably about, maybe a 4 or 5 is where I'm coming from, just because I don't see the experience of who you've helped and what you've done for them. I see the potential is definitely there, but I don't see results, which is what I was looking for. Because when you hire, you want to get results.
Exactly.
Yeah. This looks more like a corporate resume to me than an employment coach resume.
Okay.
And one of the things, and Colleen, I talk about this all the time, one of the things I don't see on here is that forward-looking piece. So when people are in today's world, they got these challenges, they want to be able to look forward, and they don't necessarily have that vision. What you've bought is your history. You've bought your history. You really haven't bought how you've taken that experience and applied it moving forward.
Right. So maybe these are the things that I am most proud of, right? So, you know, like publishing my first novel was like this, I want to shout it from the roof, but it has nothing to do with the position that I want, right? So we see this as we see this as one of the number one opportunities. People they don't want to shed the things that they're most proud of on their resume, so they don't create a resume that really speaks to their audience. Now I'm going to just take a different approach, and I want you to now assess the revised resume. It's not a lie, it's not different, it's not fabricated, but it's just tells you a different story.
This one is dead on. I would give it a 10. It gives me what I want to know to hire somebody in that area.
So when we write a resume, too often our emotions land on that page, right? That very first resume, those are my emotions. Those are things I'm so proud of. I couldn't be prouder to be a mom. I couldn't be prouder to be a wife. I could not be prouder of my volunteer efforts in the community. These are things that mean so much to me. But to the person who's looking to hire, we have to ask ourselves that question. Are we really answering the question of who are they looking for? What do they want? So now I want to skip over to the next thing where we're talking about at hello, right? What is it? Could your initial introduction be what's throwing it off? So many of you have your resumes working, you're getting that first phone call, and after the first phone call, thank you guys for that honest feedback. The next step is, are you losing it at hello? Are you not getting that phone call back? And that's another skill set that you want to dig into. So the biggest thing that we see is every company throws everything that they want on their website. And when I call I will call 20, 30 people a day sometimes during that pre-screening to just say, hey, I'm just doing a quick call to make sure that, you're still interested in the position and want to make sure that you're a good fit and this is something that works for you. Do you have a second to talk to me? And during that conversation, I will rule out generally 95% of the phone calls that I make. Now, here's a couple, I can give you a couple tricks to get through it. But first of all, if you apply for a job, understand who the company is and why you want the job. And if Colleen Ferrary calls you because you've just applied for a job at NBC, and I want to see if it's a good fit, and you're not ready to talk to Colleen Ferrary, say, listen, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back in 5 minutes? And then go, make sure that you on NBC that she's calling me about. I better go do my research and figure out who is it. So I'm using Apple as an example because Apple on their website will give you so much information, including videos, right? But when you are preparing for the pre-interview, I call it storytelling. Like anytime we talk, we need to be prepared to tell our story. But in that first level here, during the pre-interview, they're looking for something really specific. They want to know that you have the skill. They want to know that you're realistic about the pay. They want to know where and how you can work. They want to make sure that you're articulate and friendly. That in this case with Apple Community, they scream it on every page. So you should have a good story there. And then also, that you want to be first. One of their core things that is important to them is that. Sorry. I don't know where that sound is coming from.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm trying to find it.
I haven't cut my hair yet.
But so they're only looking for a small set of skills during that first call. So during the pre-interview, if you're not prepared to talk to these pieces, you're going to get passed up. If they want to pay $120,000 and you are saying, I'll get in the door and they're going to love me so much that they're going to pay me $160,000, I guarantee during that pre-screening, they're going to hear that and you're not going to get called back. So you have to be completely present with what they're looking for in that space. And if you're not going to get that. When you prepare for the interview, that next level, that culture piece, those interviews are based on a completely different skill set. They're going deeper in these, and those are more about the culture and the innovation and team. Like they've already assessed that you have the skill sets. Now they want to know who you are. So that storytelling becomes very important because they have their behavioral questions that they're going to ask. You have to tell your story and how, if it's Apple, how you're innovative, how you're a team player, how you're not afraid of new ideas, all of those things. You have to be prepared with that storytelling because that's what's going to differentiate you between everyone else. Because, I can't remember a position in the last 2 years that I've hired for that I haven't sat there with 20 applications and said, man, they're all equally qualified. So that it really becomes a big challenge. I gotta get rid of that video on there. The other question, and I, David and I talked about this. This is one of these things that comes up all the time, and I wanted to make sure that we added it into this presentation because there is a lot of conversation about over 50 candidates, and there's a lot of stuff that we keep in our head about that. So I just wanted to have some open conversation about how we kind of take ourselves out of the game, because when that 20-year-old calls and does that pre-screening, or we have this idea of who someone is looking for, sometimes we take ourselves out of the game before we're even in it because of ourselves. So a couple things in the interview, on the application, you don't have to put down every single job. You have to put down the last 10 years or relevant, or 20 years of experience. Put down what's relevant. But what they're really, the honest piece behind ageism is the fear that hiring manager might have, or the fear that you think that they have. And so these are a couple things that hiring managers might be thinking in their head. Oh, you're too expensive. Oh, you're going to intimidate the management. You're that old dog that won't learn new tricks. You want to do things the way that you want to do it. Today's environment, there's, people, especially with new companies, are working a ton of hours. Oh, they're not going to want to work those hours. They've got kids, they've got this, that, whatever. So there's a whole bunch of things going through their head, and you have the option to perpetuate that fear that they already have. Sometimes you create the fear that they have because of language that you use. Sometimes this fear isn't here at all. Sometimes the candidate, I've hired for a lot of startups that are saying, we need someone with experience. Like, we're too young. We need somebody who has been down the road, who can really kind of give us some insight, who knows what we're going to expect in this environment. So, but sometimes when it comes to, hey, I'm over 50, I'm over 60, I've been in this job, people don't want me. We have this self-talk that is really, really, really dangerous. So I want to make sure that listen, record yourself during interviews, do some mock interviews. When you record yourself, I want you to listen for language that you are perpetuating those fears, because we all do it, myself included. All right, let's dig in. I'm gonna stop sharing here a little and just open it up for questions. And if oops, let me see your shining faces on here.
Right.
I want to go ahead. So
Colleen,
initial thoughts or initial questions?
Yeah, and Colleen, in this job that you recently advertised, correct me if I'm wrong, you got about 1,000 responses?
So we for our clients, we will generally apply a whole bunch of different ones. So we will receive, like, I will tell you, if I put a job for a film company, we'll easily in a weekend get 1,200 applications. Tech startups, you're in the 300 to 500 range.
Could I ask, one of the pieces of common wisdom I'm hearing from folks like yourself is, and that half of those folks who respond will not be patently not be qualified for the job?
Yeah, and that goes to, remember the resume that I showed you? That, there's some interesting pieces. So I had a legal position that was open for a company that I was hiring for. And I looked at all those resumes, and there was this one particular guy, right? And out of all the resumes, now I'm going to tell you what happens. So the first thing that happens is I go to the head legal officer, and I go to the person that this new hire is going to report to, and I say, hey, what are you looking for in this position? And there's basic qualifications. They have to have this degree, or they have to have this, but then there's some other things that happen. Well, I really want them to have intellectual property experience. I really would like them to have worked with a startup before. There's some really like nuanced things that they're looking for. And what I do is I put those in the job description. Like when I post for that position, not all people will, but I believe 90% of people will put all those nuances in that job description. So you're not going into this blind. That's where your cover letter is going to help you. But in this particular position, I had this legal position. My goodness, John, there was a lot of resumes, Probably, I want to say this one I had maybe 700 or something. But there was this one particular guy who just kept reapplying, just kept following up. I don't know. He didn't even have my name, and I was, off the radar, but somehow he just kept working and, hey, just wanted to follow up, really would love this position. And I looked at his resume, and his resume was an absolute train wreck. He had so much great experience, but he just didn't pull it together in a way that made him qualified for this particular position. And for me, it was, we look at when they say 6 seconds, when you're looking at a resume for 6 seconds, I'm telling you, you are looking at a resume for 6 seconds. It is possible, it's feasible, and you're looking for those things that are deal breakers. You're trying to disqualify them. And this poor guy had every disqualifier on his resume. But I'm like, you know what? There's something about this guy. He really wants the job. I'm going to go and I'm going to go and just talk to him. I don't know what compelled me to do this, but I did. And you know what? This guy was probably one of the most qualified people that we have ever gotten. He just didn't put the right stuff on the resume based on the job description, right? From a keyword perspective, he had it all in there, but it wasn't, you can put all the keywords you want to get your resume there. I still have hundreds of resumes to go through, right? Just the keywords are going to put it in order for you based on priority. So then this kid redid his resume for me. I shouldn't say that, it's like younger than me, right? But it doesn't make him a kid. But he redid his resume, and he made it into the top 3. Right? Now, he didn't get the job, but he still made it into the top 3. But he wouldn't have, I think there's a couple lessons there, right? It's not only just about making sure that you have the right stuff on the resume and in your cover letter, but it's also about making sure that you take that, you're persistent. If you want a job, go for it. You got to work for it. Finding a job is a full-time job.
So I have a question to follow up with this.
Sure.
Since the resumes can be so wrong, right? It seems almost like you're taking a lot of, I'm not just picking on you, I'm saying in general. It seems like there's way too much stock placed in them, and also as a way to not just say go, no go, but to rank candidates. And I really wonder if there's that much high quality, high predictive powered data in a piece of paper that someone came up with on their laptop.
Well, I think there's a couple questions here, but I think the real thing is there are so many resumes that you receive that are so spot on. So if your resume isn't so spot on for the position that you're applying for, unfortunately, you only have so much bandwidth, and you have to make an educated guess based on the information that's in your hands. So yeah, there's a ton of predictive analysis, and some companies don't have any, some have a ton of it, right? It depends on who we work with. But even things like Indeed or they'll rank them based on who has the most keywords and matches. You know, it's just kind of a natural algorithm that's in there. So, you know, I love, if you don't know how close your resume aligns, I love LinkedIn. If you put your resume on LinkedIn and then go for apply for a job, it'll actually tell you of the candidates, you're in the top 50%, you're in the top 25%. I think that's a great, I think if you can get in the top 25% of candidates on that LinkedIn measurement and then write a cover letter that fills a gap for the rest of the qualifications that they're looking for, I think you have a much better shot. Adam, did I answer your question?
Not exactly. Well, I mean, you kind of led me to another question, which is that if you have resumes that are all spot on, right, then in a way, they're all kind of the same resume and you can't make that much of a distinction based on them. So instead of optimizing for, you know, how many like keywords I can squeeze out of this pile of resumes, wouldn't it make more sense just to grab one, call the person, and go from there? Because you could hire someone almost overnight
As a hiring manager. Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
because
No,
yeah,
absolutely
because
not. Yeah. Well,
it
you want to
doesn't make
make
that much sense to try to rank these people because, like I said, there's not much discriminatory information in there or distinguishing information.
Well, there is. There absolutely is. So, you know, I'm sure that you guys have all heard power words. You've all heard. So there's things that when I read a resume, there's things that scream out about who that person is and is an individual. Like the words that you choose when you write your resume. Is this person a leader? Is this person a collaborator? Is this person an innovator? That can be seen on a resume. So based on what you're looking at. Well, here's the job as a hiring manager. Like, I don't want just the right person. I want the best person. So I'm going to take 20 or 30 of the people who look like they're absolutely the best fit, and I'm going to find the best of them. So that's where that networking piece, so kind of here, real world stuff, right? Real world is that I had a company, I went into their office like a couple weeks ago, and they were hiring for a position. They said, Colleen, can you help us? We have all of this, you know. And so they had, you know, hundreds of resumes on Indeed and all of this stuff, and it was just so overwhelming. But then before lunchtime, when I was in their office, I also had about 20 recommendations from their staff. So emails where somebody said, hey, listen, I have a friend of a friend who I think would be great for this job, or hey, can you please talk to this person? Well, guess who jumps to the top of my list? Because I owe it to, like, first of all, the people that work in that environment, they know exactly what we're looking for. They understand the culture. So the chance of that person coming through a referral, honestly, no, doesn't mean that I always hire somebody that comes from a referral. It's probably 50-50, to be honest. But there's two reasons why I'm going to talk to those 20 people or 30 people. And I'm going to talk to them because I owe it to my team and the people that I'm working for to hear them. They have someone, and either if it's a favor for them or if it's something they really believe in, I owe it to them to at least have a conversation with these folks, right? But also, I have, you know, I also want to assume that these aren't absolutely the best people. And there's also this list of this group of people from my resume bank. So I think when you're looking for a job, like when I go back to that networking slide, I'm like, that's critical, because all of a sudden now you've jumped like 3 levels in that resume pile, and you're now at the top of it because you made a great connection.
What I'm
Colleen,
trying to
may I
say
make
is
a
that
statement? I would like to make a statement, and I want you to push back. And before I make that statement, I want to precede it with saying, I applied for a position, and the HR person told me, this is what she told me. We received 120 applicants. I opened the first 20, and I invited 5 for interview. So that's very realistic. Now, here is the statement that I want you to push back. No human is looking more than 100 resumes for a position. Is that a fair statement
No, that's not fair. Well, I think when you look at that 6 seconds, you're scrolling through at a pretty fast rate because you don't want to miss anybody. I would, so if that HR person worked for me, I would probably coach them because I don't think that they're really finding the best person for the job. Just because I happen to see a job posted Monday and applied for it first doesn't make me best. It makes me lucky, right? So, no, I think I would probably say, I think I would say you're probably, there's in a level of exhaustion, Alex, to your point that I agree with. There's a level of exhaustion that hits you after like 300 or 400 that you're like, oh my goodness, you know, like, but you still have to
After a while,
siphon.
I reviewed in my career many resumes, and I'll tell you what, after a while, I mean, all of them look alike. What are you looking for?
Yeah,
You know,
I'm looking for what those, Alex, what I'm looking for is what is important to the person that person's going to be reporting to. Like, remember how I said there's nuances, right? There's nuances. Does this person have intellectual property experience? Well, I'm going to go through those 300 resumes and I'm going to start by, the first thing I'm going to do is anybody who couldn't care enough to have a good format or have spelling issues falls off my list. That's easy. They're not accurate. I'm in legal. If they're creative, maybe I'll look at them twice. But if there's somebody who's going to deal with detail, that stuff is like, they're the first ones off my list. Then the second thing I'm going to look for is, do they have the right degree or qualification? If they don't have that, then they now go to the turn down pile. And then I'm going to look for the thing that really is that differentiator. If it's IP, or if it's whatever that hiring manager has said is really important to them that they're looking for, those are the ones that I'm going to pull to the top of the list. So it's not necessarily, you're not reading every resume saying, oh, okay, this is great. It's like when you guys looked at my resume, you didn't have a time to look at it, right? You look for what was important to you. Did I have a history of success? Have I hired? So I think there's, they're looking for specific notes in that resume that align with what's important to that company.
Colleen, and I would add to that, this conversation, it's really about, it's situational. So I'm going to give you two different ideas here.
True.
Number one, if it's a resume that's coming in through a Fortune 500 company, well, they've got the underlying resources to be able to tease some of those out, to get different eyes and tools looking at that before it gets to the hiring manager. And then the hiring manager is potentially going to get their staff engaged to look at it. That's going to be very different than a smaller company that doesn't have the luxury of time or those resources. And that's number one. Number two, under that, I think your eyes become, again, it depends on whose seat you're in. But one company is probably looking for, did you work at Microsoft? Did you work at Google? Did you work at Facebook? Because the perception is that is better than not working at those. So if you had to give me a resume and I had to look at it in 6 seconds, those are the first things that my eye is going to look at. And I could, in theory, look at 50 resumes because, oh, wait, these are the FANG guys. These are the non-FANG people. Boom, 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 boom. And I went through that looking for one very specific thing. And now I can go from there. So to me, that underlying context of, did you have a name? Did you have something that really aligns? That hiring manager knows what they're looking for. And if they don't see it on that first page, their eyes looking for the word, didn't see it, done. So that would be the next level. I always hear that 6 seconds. But to me, if you're going to give me 50 resumes, I can look at all 50 because I know exactly that word or that company I'm looking for. And if it's not there, whoops, you lost. So
well said. Well said. I think you're going to be surprised, and I should probably be careful with the term hiring manager. When I think about the word, it's that team that is, it could be a team of recruiters. It's that first blush, that for whoever's looking at that first, after it gets through your aggregator, right? But great point.
I wanted to push back on the idea that the person who applies first isn't best, they're just lucky. I mean, there is an opportunity cost in waiting and in applying more recruiting tools. Like, there's 7 billion people on the planet. And if all 7 billion people applied to that job, it wouldn't actually make sense in practice to try to review 7 billion resumes, right? It
Sure,
would make much
sure.
more sense if you really are getting 1,000 resumes and they are largely quite qualified for the position, then, I mean, is there necessarily that much value in the next 900 after you've gotten the first 100?
I think once you found 20 to 30 people who really fit through it, but I think a great hiring manager is at least scrolling through to see stuff. So I think, Adam, though, if you're looking for a job, like, I think you could get hung up on, am I first? But first isn't going to get you the job. So
Colleen?
I just want to worry that you're majoring on the minors here a little bit.
No, that's not my point.
Some of
But
the,
I'm saying,
some of the
like,
things that aren't being addressed in the conversation is you're not just setting in a resume of keywords, okay? If you've done your resume appropriately, number one, you're going to put your bullets under your jobs in what we call problem, action, result format, or PAR. These PARs in themselves are going to either resonate with the hiring manager when they're looking through and screening the resume, or they may actually be a deterrent. So, there's much more context and insight that comes from reviewing the resume and looking at things like that. Additionally, 2 other points is, number one, you don't just have one perfect resume and blanketly submit it to every opportunity out there. You make the case with your resume by specifically going through the job ad and looking at that information that is pertinent to that specific job opportunity,
Right.
and elaborating on certain points where there is a match. So just to the same point that Colleen made at the start of this whole presentation, she showed you 2 different resumes. The first one was more like a blanket of her accomplishments from her personal perspective. The second one would be a focused response based upon the one that she was looking to represent herself as. That's what we talk about when we say make the case with your resume. And then the final piece that we haven't discussed is, not only do you normally submit a resume, but you submit a cover letter. And what we had suggested with the cover letter at the Breakfast Club is that you incorporate what is called a T letter. And a T letter is going through that job ad and highlighting what are the specific requirements for that job, and splitting the paper down the side and listing them on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, next to those items being sought by the hiring manager, to actually put in the experience, the education, the skill sets that you have that demonstrate that you're a match. So the resume could be one piece of it. The T letter will sit there and it explicitly show to the interviewer, here is what you're asking for. This is what I have and what makes me a good match for this specific opportunity. Now, making the case with the resume and doing your T letter will take a significant amount of time, but when you're applying for the job, it's usually hard to find those specific opportunities that you really are passionate about and really want. And in that case, it's more about quality of submission, not quantity of submission. So when you find those opportunities that are a great match for you, things that you're passionate about, invest the extra time in making the case with the resume, incorporating a T letter into your cover letter, and that's how you're going to distinguish yourself from the rest of the candidates, and then help that interviewer or that screener see why you're you're a fit versus those other people that are applying for the same job.
Frank, I think that's great advice. And I think what I love about the T letter that you described was, one of the challenges with a cover letter, especially when you have such a robust job market, is that a hiring manager doesn't have the time to read really long documents. Like you have to think about that 6 seconds. So, and I will tell you that I've seen companies that are incredibly quirky too. Like I had one company that and it was in the job description, if in your cover letter you didn't tell why you were passionate about food, they refused to talk to you. I've had the most qualified people for that company go through, and they would refuse to talk to them because they missed that one nuance. So you're absolutely right. When you really want a company, you really want a job, take the company and take all of those steps, like, and especially that networking step. Reach out, like there's 6 degrees of separation. Go figure out who you know in that company and take the time to do that. And then if you want to send out 5 more resumes today that are just kind of, I hope I get them, but I'm not passionate about it. I think it's a better strategy. Spend the quality time on the ones that you really, really want. And then throw out a few Hail Marys. Hail Marys can't hurt.
And what we found with the T letters is a lot of times when it comes down to it, the hiring manager has to make a decision across a number of candidates that are qualified. And sometimes we've found that the hiring manager will actually take the person and give them an edge over the others that have done the T letter, because ultimately they have to go back to HR or their manager and make the case of why they chose that candidate over the others. And the T letter gives them, 80 to 90% of the information that demonstrates why that candidate was a great fit for the opportunity. So you're basically doing the hiring manager's work for them and justifying your candidacy on why you should be selected for the job.
Great point.
One thing I heard.
When you're talking about hundreds of resumes coming in and being reviewed, isn't it usually HR or some unit like that is actually doing that as opposed to the hiring manager?
It is. That's why I want to try to clarify my use of the term hiring manager, because it varies based on the size of the company. Yes.
And the hiring manager might say, give me the top 10, and then I'll look at them after you send them out.
And usually those top 10 are pre-screened before they're delivered to a hiring manager.
Right.
So that's where that being able to present yourself confidently and making sure that you have that hiring manager or that first pre-screening interview, that you can show that you understand the company and you're a good cultural fit quickly for that company, is really important. I mean, I'll tell you, I've picked up the phone to make these calls, right, pre-screening calls, and somebody's like, yeah, you're like, oh, sorry, wrong number. You just like, this is how they are really, like, I'm like, oh, this is okay. This person is, they didn't know who I was on the other side of the line. So yeah, but the hiring manager will get pre-screened, generally will get pre-screened resumes.
Colleen, for those jobs that you mentioned this morning, how many resumes did you send to your client?
I usually give them the top 5 and with 3 that I recommend, but I'm actually hired to do, this is why it's so fun to help people get jobs, right? And be an employment coach, because you kind of see what people are looking for, and we kind of it's such an emotional process. But when I deliver it, it's generally somebody who we've already done some pre-screening. We've done a first initial interview with them because we want to protect their time. Based on the company, like if I'm hiring somebody for NBC, that would be like a very specific, it wouldn't generally be interns or something like that, where we're hiring a big number of people. Then it's a little different process. That's going to go through a committee. They have people who will do the pre-screening and interviewing, and you're more operating in a recruiting perspective.
Are you using an ATS of any variety?
I use what they have, to be honest with you. So I'm more, because I operate in a consulting basis when I hire. So
Okay.
I use, I don't like whatever they're using, I do use.
So would most of them have an ATS?
It's 50-50, but keep in mind I operate in companies with, most of my space is in companies with less than 200 to 150 employees. So they're new, they're in hiring mode, they're like, they need to get people in there quickly. So depending on the company, I would say it's 50-50. But almost every like tool that you use has some kind of aggregator that prioritizes who the best candidate is for you today.
One observation I have is in the discussion between you and Adam a little earlier, it seems like Adams was discussing the perspective of the hiring process needs to change or improve to ensure they find the best candidate. And so that's how I heard the conversation. And the little bit of a challenge I have with that is when we apply to the one or more companies we apply to, we can't change their hiring process. So if what we're hearing is that hiring departments currently, or some of them are maybe overwhelmed with the 200 or 500 resumes they're getting, they may stop at the 100, if that's the number that Alex said. They may say, oh, I found the 5 out of the first 100, this will do. And so while it may not be the best out of the 500, it's the best that they reviewed. So I think we need to play in their space right now and get our resumes in early and try and be as competitive in an environment that we have little control over.
I will tell you the number, David, I think that that's spot on. We're not going to change the company before we join them, right? And there's all different levels of folks that are HR managers. I mean, there's HR managers and there's HR directors and people who are SHRM qualified and people who just were in bookkeeping and all of a sudden are hiring. Like you have all different levels of talent at that space that you're meeting them at their space. The number one thing that you can do is strategically network. And, like when we do our group calls, and Frank, maybe this is something that you want to implement, like when you put your name on there, instead of having Colleen Ferrari, employment tutors, or David Schushman, or whatever your name is, then we put Colleen Ferrari and the industry that you're interested in getting into. Because then what that happens is it allows you to say, oh, wait, Jerry knows somebody in the IT space, or he wants to know someone in the IT space. Well, I know a ton of people there. So let me go and help Jerry out, because givers get, and I help somebody out. And maybe Jerry knows somebody and I build a great relationship by helping Jerry. I feel good about myself. And Jerry knows somebody in the HR field that I'm interested in meeting. So it's like finding people in the right industry for you. Not that that's always going to work. Jerry might know somebody in 22 different industries because they're neighbors that he can connect you with. But like being really strategic and teeing yourself up to know people in the space that you want to be is absolutely your best tool to get there right now. Maybe that's going to change in a year. We're going to have, only get 10 resumes for an open position and everybody gets to play. But right now, like being really strategic, it's better. Like we teach this thing called the circle of influence. And it's identifying 20 people who are going to have the most influence, in this case, on your career. And saying, who are those people? Who are the people, 20 people that I know or don't know or could know that I think I really need to build a relationship with that can help me get where I want to go. And they could be mentors, but being really strategic about those relationships. And what I challenge my clients to do is every single day you call and connect with 2 of those people. So you're touching base with them twice a week, and not about, hey, do you have a job for me yet? But hey, how are your kids? Like, how's that boat you just bought? Like real relationships with these 20 people are key influencers. So when something does come up, they're going to be like, Oh, I know Colleen. Oh my God, I talk to Colleen all the time. She'd be great for that job. That's how you're going to get a job. That's how you're
Well,
going to get your resume to the top of the pile.
I would also say, looking back at your presentation today, you made that reference of those 350 different products in the shampoo aisle, and how do you differentiate yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about when the resume comes through, making the case with the resume and doing the T letter. But we also talked about the context and the insight that you deliver through the pars on your resume. And when we hear people talking about, well, I've heard it now over 40, over 50, I'm going to have a hard time getting hired. But I think it's because of the word choice when people are representing their experience on their resume in the pars. We feel that code words are like, the employment manager or hiring manager is looking for a digital native. Well, how many of these older job seekers that feel that they're being discriminated against are talking about how they fully adopted, digital technologies, that, people look at them as an influencer within the group? Just because you're older doesn't mean you don't have those skill sets or competencies or capabilities. But if we don't highlight that and bring that forth within the pars, within the resume, we're doing ourselves a disservice by branding ourselves with that legacy information that really has a gap in what some of the current employers are looking for. If I'm going to be implementing digital ecosystems and going through a digital transformation, I want people that are knowledgeable in where I'm moving to, not in the legacy systems of where I've been. And
Right.
your resume is your branding document. They are forming an opinion on you just by going through that resume. And if their whole thing is they need people that are going to be innovative, going to be creative, that they're going to be able to guide the mind share and gain that mind share towards driving change, and you're looking at someone who's represented themselves as legacy that may not be willing to make those changes, they've got enough of that already. They want somebody who's going to, be a game changer for them and help them get to where they need to be. So again, when you look through that resume, think again of how Colleen showed you the before and the after of the two resumes. You want your resume to be in that category of the second resume she showed. So you're showing how you're a match for the environment they're trying to create, that they're looking to migrate to. And I've seen it time and time again. I had one guy come to us a couple of years ago. He'd been a data center manager for 20 years. And he told me, well, I've been in search for a year. I can't find a job. And I said, I really find that hard to understand, because right now, cloud is growing at such an enormous rate that these cloud service providers would be dying to have somebody like you. He never took the time to understand cloud. The industry didn't come up with something new overnight, this new magical formula. It's still servers sitting in racks that are connected to a network. But I had to teach him how, what we used to call dedicated facilities management was basically, private cloud, and that, what we call, public cloud was really shared facilities maintenance, and basically draw the correlations for him. And then it was like his whole world and mindset opened up, and he's like, wait a second, all they're doing is calling things by different connotations. And of course, I understand how to do all of that. I've done it for 20 years. He went back out there, and within a month and a half, he had landed with CenturyLink in running one of their cloud data centers. But that's the whole thing. You have to understand, even with nomenclature, you could sit there and brand yourself as being a good candidate for a job or a bad candidate for a job, because each of these word choices say something about you. They say something about your mindset, and they say something about your positioning. And again, you've got to make the case every time you're submitting the resume for those jobs that you truly are interested in, because, those really strong matches aren't as frequent normally as you would like. And if they're that few and far between, you want to make the most of each and every one you go after.
Well said. We have two tests that I'll give you to kind of just check yourself on two of the things you talked about, Frank. The first one is that shampoo aisle. That we do this exercise, which we find incredibly valuable. So the first thing I'd love you to do is write down the 5 things, your dream job, that perfect job or position that you want. And if you don't know the answer to this, even if you do think you know the answer to this, I would actually go and pull up a few job descriptions of companies that are looking for it, old or new, and find the 5 most important things to these companies, to this particular position. What do they care about the most when hiring for this position? And then and you have to be really true and honest to yourself when you do this. We kind of do this in a live setting, so it catches people off guard. But to do it yourself, then take your resume after you have that list of 5 things and go find those 5 things in your resume and highlight them. And if you don't find those things, you wrote your resume. If you don't find those things in 6 seconds, you can pretty much guarantee that your resume is going to have a hard time passing this test. But the other thing is highlight them and find out, when you highlight them, you might find that they're at the bottom or they're hidden, they're not on the front page. Like, figure out how to get those things on the front page of your resume, because if they're the 5 most important things for the job, those are the 5 things that whoever is reviewing your resume that's going to get you out of that pile of 1,000. The other thing is that I love that you talked about is how you frame things, and in your resume that kind of says, hey, I'm living in the past, or I'm innovative, I'm here now, I'm a continuous learner, and I'm ready to roll, in the future. And that where that ageism piece comes in, we often see it displaying itself in a resume because of someone's verbiage. So, the best thing to do is take your resume and give it to a college student and say, hey, just highlight anything, or your son or daughter, because they're going to be so happy to give you critical feedback, right? Your kids. But say, highlight anything that gives you pause on this, and they're going to be really quick to highlight it. But sometimes it's things like, I've led the top sales team for 20 years by doing this, and it's an outdated process, and it's not forward thinking, or, so it's things that come out on your resume that just, we've had somebody put like they're proficient in Word. Well, that when you put your skills, make sure, to Frank's point, it's the newest cutting edge. Like, sometimes it's just there's tons of free classes. I don't know if you guys use Udemy or whatever, but if there's something that you want to learn, go learn it. It'll take you, a couple days or a week to take a class on Udemy and now have that skill that they're looking for, that's going to make you a little more relevant today. So just a lot of times it's a verbiage that dates someone and makes us worried that they're not open to change.
So
and Colleen, to that point, a lot of times on the LinkedIn profile, the skills that are listed are of that type. And we'll find people, but I don't want to get rid of it. I've got 200, endorsements on that skill. Right. I'm like, that skill is taking you down like a rock attached to your neck. Get that skill off of there, because it's hurting you much more than it's helping you. But they have a hard time letting go of it just because of the number of endorsements on it.
Yeah, sometimes it's interesting as an employment coach, right? When you're really helping somebody to break through, it's sometimes it's a little disruptive to what we believe should be the case, right? Like, if we're thinking, hey, if I'm hiring for this position, this is what I would do. And so that's what's in our resume. That's what's in our strategy. And it's really sometimes very hard to say, okay, the strategy is for somebody who is completely overworked, who has 6 seconds to look, and this is what they're being told by their boss that they need, like, and helping them. Like, our job should be helping them find us, right?
Yeah, but it's actually worse than that, Colleen, because in this environment where, I mean, I remember back in the day, I use this example all the time. Back in the early, 1985-ish, 1988-ish, pick that time frame, there was this thing called SQL Server. And if you didn't learn SQL Server and you heard about this thing, it was actually possible to get a book and over the course of, pick your time period, a week, 2 weeks, maybe even 2 months, to actually learn this and say, oh, okay, I now have a new skill. The problem was people got so complacent about when they learned a skill that they thought they had time. Well, what happened was things kept speeding up, and the problem was you could no longer catch up as quickly. So now we have a point today where people basically, the only thing they can wrap their value prop around are skills that really aren't valuable in the marketplace today. And acquiring those new skills is going to take such a level of insight, time, investment that they don't even know where to start. So it's analysis by paralysis. So
yeah, I think that's where I think you're right, George. That's where a great employment coach is going to come in, because they're going to help you figure out what skills you need to get on that resume. I think you're absolutely right on that one.
I'm not so sure about that.
When you're looking at new technologies, let's say you're in networking right now and you start investing your time in learning 6G. Well, there's not people with 10 years of experience in 6G out there. Everybody's learning it. So pick a new technology that is consistent where you want to be now and invest the time. And guess what? You've almost leveled the playing field out of the gate, because everybody's new to learning it. Quantum computing, all different areas right now. If you start on them, you're learning it alongside all these other folks as well.
I want to throw out something, though, to go back to George a little bit. I think you said we don't have time to learn new skills, but I think that, there's folks out there that they've spent a year or 6 months or whatever looking for this job. And I would say, had they invested in a 7-day or a 6-week Udemy course, it's free, right? Like, would they still be having that same conversation? So you have to make really good decisions. Like, we can't say it in this type of setting, right? There's no blanket answer. But I think that when you build those networks, those 20 people that really can help you get where you want to be, those people are people who are going to stretch you, right? Who are a little uncomfortable. Think about like the Tim Ferriss, those 5 people, right, that you surround yourself with. They're going to push you in, and having conversations with them every 2 weeks are going to make you think about, okay, this is how this business environment has changed, and this is how I need to be there. And they're going to help give you those answers too. So I don't think it's.
Well, you hit the key thing, Colleen, because in this day and age, let's kind of break this into a quick tier. The first tier is people say, well, I went out and got the certification and nothing happened. Well, that just tells me you got the certification and you understand the terminology, but you don't know how to apply the technology. And if you get in that interview, trust me when I tell you, if you came to me with a certificate only, I know the first 2 questions to ask you that's going to tell me how deep your knowledge is. Exactly. And you have the certificate, but if you don't have the and even if you don't physically have the results, but to your point, you talked to somebody, you started getting those insights, you started learning the application of it. Well, now all of a sudden it's a very different question. Right. But if you just show up hat in hand with a certificate, it doesn't mean anything.
Right. And don't underestimate the.
And I sent this article to George about a week ago. It was a great article that showed those that engage on an improvement or a continuous learning versus those that don't. So let's say there's person A that does nothing, or person B that takes maybe 30 minutes a day or 60 minutes a week, right? It becomes 30 minutes to the 365th power, or it becomes 60 minutes to the 52nd power. It's that almost like compounding of interest as you're investing that time, what you're getting in as a return for being a continuous learner over that entire period. And that's really what the people that aren't engaging are missing out on. It doesn't have to be go heads down and take a course, full time for 6 months. Even if you're investing a little bit consistently, day after day or week after week, it really adds up quite quickly by the end of that year in the difference that you've made in your knowledge and your understanding and your career ultimately.
I love that. And there's some groups like I think not even just taking a class, but learning to apply it is important. So, like I love the movie The Intern with, is it Robert De Niro, right? Like you're never too old to go and intern, right? Like go get that skill and work with somebody who does it. But there's groups like the one that comes to mind is Girls at Code, but there's lots of groups out there that can actually like, there are groups about coding or technology that just meet because they love to talk about that stuff. Those are people that are probably employed who probably know the people that you want to know. I mean, there's a group for everything right now on Facebook, right? But getting involved with those groups too is going to open up your network and also give you some of that experience that you want to build on. We did a survey about 10 years ago, and I believe really strongly that it still holds, that the two qualities that make for a successful employee at the highest of levels, and the two common qualities that people are looking at are your ability to be a continuous learner and look forward, and also confidence. And we see, especially with employment tutors, we see a lot of folks that are like, oh, I'm not prepared, or I'm too old, or I've like, this is there's this imposter syndrome that, we don't get a job the first time, or there's a lot of people out there. You could be incredibly qualified for that job. There was just something that has nothing to do with you that made somebody else get the job before you. Like, because you didn't get the job doesn't mean that you were not an amazing fit. And sometimes, or an amazing, IT guy or whatever it is, like you need to really kind of make sure that you show up every day with knowing that you are capable and you can do that. And too often people don't get through the interview because their confidence keeps them from getting there. So, I would also make sure that before you go into these interviews, if you're worried that you're missing a skill set, have that different conversation with yourself saying, hey, listen, I am a continuous learner and I know I can learn this skill set, but this isn't the reason they're going to hire me. They're going to hire me because I will know the skill set, and I will adapt to what they need. But here are the other things I bring to the table. Too often we show up thinking about what we don't have versus what we really bring.
I did want to push back a little bit on the idea that skills necessarily become out of date with time. I'm in tech, and I can say that the C programming language is the same virtually as it was when it was published more or less in like 1970. And if you have been coding in C since 1970, you've only gotten better with time. There really is nothing new under the sun, and you can learn the whole language in a few months. C++, I mean, there's always more stuff getting piled onto that dirt ball, but same idea. It's a field really where stuff typically doesn't get thrown out. I mean, sometimes it does, but stuff like Java is still there. Python has been around for 20 years. So I do think that sometimes, or really a lot of the time, AIRP did a study. It really is just people thinking that you can't teach an old dog new tricks or whatever. It's not your fault. And I wouldn't necessarily say there's anything you can do about it. And we're just going to have to put the civil rights protections against ageism back in place, because we had them and then we took them off. And now we have this problem where, like, if you lose your job between ages 50 and 65, then there's like a 90% chance you won't financially recover from it. That's what AARP found.
Yeah.
Python's been around since the early 80s at Bell Labs.
I
Yeah,
think what you're missing with that observation, Adam, yes, C has been around for a long time. I used to be a C programmer. I did COBOL, and I don't know that there are many COBOL jobs available. I think what you have to think about is not that your C skills have diminished, but less people are hiring for C programmers the longer time goes by. There are newer technologies that are more able to be used for newer technologies. New languages for newer technologies are more efficient and effective. So you're fishing in a less stocked pond when you stick with older technologies.
It depends on what you're going for. If you're like I classify myself as a low-level programmer, and that typically C, assembler, all that stuff, once you're down in the operating system, down by the hardware, there are fewer jobs, but it's a niche market. So you are able to find it, and there are jobs out there for that. You just have to ferret them out.
And
yeah, I
sometimes
think
what
it goes
happens,
back to,
Joe, is yeah, I mean, I agree with your point, and I know a Fortran programmer, but you may have to expand your geography. If you live in central New Jersey, you may have to consider relocating if they don't support telecommuting. So you have to be more flexible, certainly, when you want to work with older jobs. But of course, you become the specialist in that field should you be able to find some of those jobs.
I also think it goes back to that shampoo aisle, right? So every bottle of shampoo has C programming. So what is it about you that's going to make somebody choose your bottle of shampoo, your brand? So it's not that the C, I might be saying it wrong, the C programming is obsolete, but what else, what sets you apart from the other people is really what it's about.
So Colleen, let me take that structure, and I'm going to take this and really map that back to your resume example. So if you were the C programming language, as Frank said, there's numerous new languages that are out there. I won't list them out, but the technology people know what those are. But if I were to take C, one way I could write my resume is to say I'm a C programmer, and I've already put myself into the quote unquote old bucket because C is perceived as an older language. However, if I were to extract out the attributes of what I need to do as a C programmer, I get to things like DevOps, I get to things like requirements, I get to things like analysis, I get to things like observability in terms of how did we monitor and manage that. Those are the skills that transfer. The logic skills transfer. The language is just an implementation. So this idea of I have a language and the language is old, that's not as important, because once your head is wired to do programming, it's wired. And it's a matter of, you have those other skills around that. But people will put up, to your earlier point, but I've been doing C program, whatever it is, for the past 15 years, I can't let that go. And it's really, which side of the coin are you looking at?
That's like what a professor of mine in college 30 plus years ago said: write it in the appropriate language to solve the problem, then convert it to what you have available. And it's really those problem solving skills. Those are transferable.
To just make a quick comment, and this is related to what George just said too, is yes, you have a fundamental base of skills in IT, but I notice what the teams, when they're putting together new initiatives, they look for those people that use the new terminology, have also showed that they can learn new tools from that. So they see words like DevOps and other tools like that. Those are the people they bring in. If they see that you really haven't really extended yourself, they're really not interested in it. It's the ability to learn and adapt to new things is what they want.
So I am kind of curious with this conversation because, one of the challenges that I posed to all of you in the beginning is, where in the process are you stalling? So based on this conversation, it sounds like we're stalling on paper. Is that a common theme here with this group, that we're not getting past the networking and paper part to get to that first interview?
Colleen,
Yes.
I would say it's more broad in communication. So I've seen people that we've coached and they've modified, they've used the T letter, they've gotten into, the resume being selected, but then they fell down in the interview. So it has to be end-to-end communication, and that starts with changing the mindset. unless they do a reset and, put themselves fully on that new track of thinking, unfortunately, some of them fall back when they're in an interview situation to answering the questions with the legacy mindset. So
Yeah,
it's
we
really
have a lot of.
important.
Mhm.
It's really important to change the thinking of the candidate so that it shines in the resume, it shines in the interview, and really, then they're the ones selected.
And
Yeah,
Colleen,
go ahead.
and just
Colleen, to answer your question, Colleen, I think we just don't get asked in. And your example of 1,000 resumes, we're one of the 1,000 pitching. For whatever reason, you're not picking up the phone and saying, "Hi, how are you?"
So maybe it's that networking piece. If you have a great, like, are you building connections within those companies? I do want to talk a little bit about that first, because I think it's important when you first pick up the phone, when you do get that phone call. I tell you a really quick story. I know that we're like, I don't know how long we have here left, but so I had this man that worked for me. He's Harvard educated, one of the most tactical, brilliant people I've ever worked with in my entire life. He worked for me, and he led a team of about 300 people. I went to go see him in his store, and all of a sudden I watched him talking to someone in an aisle, and her face completely shifted. She was angry. She shut down. I was like, oh my gosh, Gary, what happened? So he goes, oh, nothing happened. And I'm like, really? I'm like, she didn't really seem to respond like I thought she should have based on what I think you were saying. But I couldn't hear his words. So he turned to me and he said, no, I just, I told her this. And I said, well, tell me exactly what you said to her just now. Like, use the same words, same tone, everything. And when he said it to me, I almost fell off my feet. And I said, Gary, did you say it that way? And he said, well, yeah, what's wrong with that? I'm like, really? Just like that you said it? I said, let me repeat it back to you exactly the way you said it to me. Now, it's still one of the smartest people I have ever met in my life, right? I said it back to him exactly the way he presented it to me. And he went, oh shit, I said that. We cannot hear ourselves. Like, I had another manager, one of the nicest guys you ever met in your life. I mean, this guy, I just love him still today. I talked to him. He worked for me 20 years ago. He said, he wanted to be promoted. I'm like, listen, Michael, you're not going to ever be promoted until you can show me that you have charisma and you can inspire 300 to 500 people. He said, well, I'm like, you have everything, but I don't believe that you can, I can't get you through that interview process to the next level until you can show me that you can engage and inspire others. So I said, do me a favor. Next time you're on the phone, record yourself. Just record your side of the conversation. Put your phone next to you, push record, and listen to you. So I get a call back at like 7:00 one night. And he goes, Colleen, I almost drove off the road and it's your fault. And I said, well, what do you mean, Michael? Why is it my fault? And he said, because I recorded my conversations for a day and I'm so boring that I almost put myself to sleep on my commute home. Right? We have to be able to hear ourselves. So sometimes you don't think, you're angry or not confident or stuck in the past or giving a message that's saying, something that's an alarming to an interviewer. But I promise you, if you're not getting that phone call back after a pre-screening, these are all people who already have identified that you have the skills needed to get in the door. If you're getting stuck at that first interview, it's something about your communication. And you either need a great employment coach who's going to role play and be really painfully honest with you and help you change we're not going to change who you are. A great employment coach is never going to change your personality, because we try to change a personality. It's not transparent. You're not going to be a good fit for the company that goes in there. But we're going to help you see the language that you're using, the vocabulary that you're using, and how it's hurting you. So you can find a new way to communicate that's going to get you to that second and third and fifth interview. But
So,
it's,
Colleen,
yeah.
we had this guy coming to the Breakfast Club for a while. He had to do that change in how he represented his resume and then how he responded in interviews, which he did, but then he was still failing to get interviews. And the reason was, as he was going around, and he went around to a lot of networking groups, he thought that when you went to a networking group, that was the time to let your guard down and, just complain about everything and commiserate and things like that.
Yeah.
So what he was doing was killing his brand with each and every person that he was networking with through these networking meetings.
Right.
So inevitably, somebody would hear, see his resume, interview him, be interested in him, but then would see that he had somebody connected, that they were both mutually connected to. They would reach out to them and they'd be like, oh, no, don't go near that guy. He's so negative and this and that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you have to always be interviewing. Even when you're at a networking group, you're building your brand. And those people that do that appropriately, if there's somebody on today's call and, they left a very positive impression, and then I hear of a job opportunity, I'm going to say, oh, why don't you reach out to John or Jane Smith? They seem like a great match for what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to be that person that's leaving that positive impression,
Right.
definitely at the networking meetings that you're attending, so that people want to refer things to you or even reach out to you. If you're acting, quote unquote, letting your hair down during the networking meeting and stepping out of the brand that you're trying to portray, then you're just going to kill your candidacy on your own.
I'm going to give you an example. I love that, Frank. I wish I could just have that sound bubble and just play it over and over again. I think it's so brilliant. I want to share something with you, like how I network and how I teach others to network. So, John, I'm going to pick on you a little bit, okay? So you're going to be so as I'm on this call, and I'm in a different situation, right? So I'm coming in here as a guest, and I don't know this group, but I think about John Sampson. I'm like, wow, this is a really great guy. So I wrote his name, and I said, John Sampson likes donuts. I know that it's important that he gets his coffee there. He likes to meet people in person, right? So I took a couple notes, and I said, John Sampson also has other groups that he helps out like this. So John Sampson could be somebody who could be really beneficial to my personal career, my company's growth, right? So I'm going to, after this call, now I can't reach out to 42 people that are on a call. I have to, when I network, I have to figure out who are the people on this call that are going to be interesting and add the most value for me. So I'm going to choose 4 or 5 people, and you guys have a different situation, right? Like this isn't the only networking group that you're in, I hope, but you're going to find people that you're going to say, these are people that are really interesting, that I connect with, that I think add some value. So you're going to write their names down. And then after you get off of this environment, you're going to reach out, and I'm going to call John and say, hey, can we spend some time together? And I want to hear more about John. I think he's fascinating and interesting, and I would love to build a relationship with him, not only because I feel like I connected with him and he's a good person and he has a great heart, but also I think there's some value where we can help each other. I could maybe, have another resource for to help fill positions for me and maybe help some of his groups, but maybe he could help me get coaching clients, right? But who knows? But I'm not going to go and have that conversation with John and say, I'm not going to say, hey, John, who do you have that you can refer to me? Because John doesn't know me well enough to refer me to a job, right? I'm going to take the time to build a relationship with John. And I think that's where networking goes wrong. We think if we show up in a Zoom meeting or at a breakfast meeting enough times, people are going to remember who we are. And that's not real networking. Real networking is really about taking the time to get to know someone and build a relationship with them and saying, hey, this is one of the people that I want to talk to on a regular basis. And that's how it's going to pay off.
Colleen, you just forgot one of the most important things, and that is, are they Red Sox fans?
Oh, forget it. I'm not calling you.
You're not a Yankee fan, are you? No,
well, yeah, I'm not proud of it today. The Red Sox are kicking our butts, but yeah, it's how, but yeah, John just shot himself in the foot.
sorry.
Awesome. No, but it's, lots of
While
stories
I've
on that. But
got your attention, though, could I ask you something? There's been this ageism subject in the group today. On a resume, this is common wisdom about putting things over 10, 15 years old that you've done on the resume. Any thoughts about that?
I think you put down on your resume what's relevant and important today. I know a lot of people have very differing opinions on this, but I don't think you need dates on like when you graduated, things like that. It's actually, most resumes don't have that I see, which is unless they're a campus recruit. But I think you have to decide, and that's where a great resume coach is going to help you, or, this circle of influence I talked about, that I think you have to put what is relevant. I think if you go back, 20 years, that's great. 15 years, if it's relevant, I think that's great. I think where I get nervous, I have a senior executive I was just coaching. She's with a major insurance company, and she wanted to go for an EVP, an executive vice president position. She was a director, and she was applying for the position. I was helping her with a resume, kind of helping her put stuff together. And, she's, I don't know, mid to late 50s. And she had things from 30 years ago that were really important to her on her resume. But I'm like, that Lisa, it didn't help her. All it did was just say she was holding on to the past. Like it didn't play a really valuable part. Because unfortunately, 30 years ago, if you think about how you've operated 30 years ago versus 5 years ago, it's very, very, very different. So just because she was
Colleen,
really proud of it, she took it off. Yeah.
To your point, I'll get people that'll come in for a job, and, you can see how people are trying to put in current trends or buzzwords. But you'll see people representing themselves as, quote unquote, a lifelong learner. Then you look at their resume and their LinkedIn profile, and the last education you see is a degree from 30 years ago. So if you want to go and call yourself a lifelong learner, let's put some evidence out there. It could be simply, like you said, Udemy courses that you took or things like that, but at least have something there that's referenceable and recent to demonstrate that you did it. Don't put out there that you're innovative and creative, and then you walk into a resume, an interview, and the hiring manager says, well, give me an example of one of the, most innovative things that you've come up with, and there's crickets in the background. So if you're going to go and put in some of these most sought after new buzzwords or skills that are supposedly very sought after, you better have some concrete examples to refer to, because it's going to come up in the interview.
Yeah, I love that. There's two things that are really important to current day employers right now. And, one of those, have you guys heard the term upskilling? So it's kind of a buzzword that's out there right now. They want to know, that's upskilling. They want to know that you're upskilling, that you're improving yourself on a regular basis.
Three things. There's upskilling, there's reskilling if you're changing to a different profession, but now there's a third thing called deskilling. The employers are actually looking for older workers or those with more, experience to actually unlearn some of the things the way they used to be done.
Mm-hmm.
An example would be some of the people are very bent on process and continuous improvement. But in some of these areas, there needs to be some jobs that are really looking for breakthrough innovation and improvement. And if you're showing you're dyed in the wool and a continuous process improvement type of person, you may not fit into it because they don't want to just stay on par with the market and the competitors. They want to outpace them. So again, it's very critical to understand the firm and what their objectives are. So one of the things people should do is not just read the job description, but if the company is public, grab the most recent annual report and see what the leaders of the company are saying about the strategy and the direction for the company, and determine how the position you're going to try to be a candidate for would do the things that they're looking for at the senior most level. You know, how could you be creative? How could you be innovative? What could you bring to the table? What have you had successes in that would help move the ball ahead for them? And a lot of times when you go into the interviews and you meet with these hiring managers, there are things that they really want in the position that aren't necessarily listed on the job requisition. So one of the great questions you could ask is, you know, what are the major challenges you're facing? What are those things that are keeping you up at night? And then when you find out what they are, if you've demonstrated the ability to do these in the past and you've done them successfully, turn the conversation to how you did it, what success was gained, because then you're differentiating yourself from the rest of the pack. And unless they ask the exact same question and have had that ability to drive that successfully, you may have just, you know, signed yourself up as the top candidate just by properly asking the interviewer for additional information and demonstrating that you could deliver on it.
Frank, you probably can't see this. It says you're on your phone, but I'm nodding my head really aggressively. I think you're spot on. Hey, the other thing I was going to add, was community service. So if you're not involved in the community right now, companies you're going to get passed up for that too in some situations, because it's a big piece of who, especially, you know, we went through George Floyd, we went through the Me Too movement. So if you're not active in your community and you're just active in you, that's going to set up a red flag. So that's becoming increasingly more of a differentiator with candidates today.
So I have a question about networking, because I've tried to do this and really never had much success. And my LinkedIn network's pretty small. And that's not just by chance, it's also by choice. I do prune old irrelevant connections. And one thing I've found is that, and I'm not sure if this is just because of my small network size or whatever, but honestly, I find that pretty much all of my second degree connections come from the handful of lions I have. And that's not a really sustainable way of reaching out to people. I can't say, okay, here's a list of 10 people I want you to reach out to, you know, Miss Lion. Why don't you just hit them all up for me, right? And when I've tried to reach out without prior connections, I've had no success at all.
Yeah,
So,
Adam, we can teach you how to do that. It's I'll reach out to anybody in the world. I have no problem reaching out to anybody, whether I know them, whether they don't have action, it doesn't matter. And I think if you go in there with a place of transparency and goodness, and you want to learn, people generally want to teach, right? So I think it's about not limiting yourself, but I also think it's about putting yourself in different situations. So if you're in that IT space, how many IT groups do you belong to? You know,
Well,
4 or 5.
We make it easy in the Breakfast Club. We have our own LinkedIn group. So everybody who's a member of the LinkedIn group has gone through, you know, job search and being member of the group for quite some time. Some of those members that are in our LinkedIn group have over 30,000 connections. So all you need to do is connect to the LinkedIn group for the Breakfast Club, and then start connecting to the people one by one. You should be able to, have a high acceptance rate of connections, and you should then, do the needed steps to form a relationship with these individuals by reaching out to them, and they should be much more receptive than your average person, seeing that they're part of our networking group.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. And you did mention the 30,000 connection thing, and ironically, I am a bit concerned. I'm hoping not to just connect with one person who has 30,000 connections. I would rather connect to 30 people who have 1,000 connections, because I'm going to find a lot of people I want to talk to.
Alex Freund, who's a member of our group, when he came into our group years ago, he was starting on LinkedIn. He's not only grown to 30,000 connections, but he's had to prune it down over the years consistently on a frequent basis. So Alex is very well networked. He doesn't just add people for the heck of it. And not only that, you get those as your second connections, but then that individual can help you span out. Before you know it, you have millions of people in your network because of that. And as Colleen had explained in the beginning, you have the relationship with that first level who knows of you if you spend the time and invest the effort, and then they can reach out to these other people on your behalf. If you read Covey's book, Speed of Trust, that's what it's all about, because if they have the confidence in you, and then they have the relationship with the other person, you're able to then plug in to their already relationship and run on that speed of trust to the next level of connection.
Hey, I'm just going to add one thing. Adam, you are somebody really quickly that gives me the impression that you like to run. You want to get where you're going fast. You want to make that connection immediately. And like I was mentioning with John, like when it comes to networking, sometimes you have to slow down to go faster. Like be careful that you're not just going within a wish in your heart, but you're going there to build a relationship because it's someone you want to know.
I mean, obviously, yes. What I'm trying to say is if I have a person, right? If I just have one LinkedIn connection, this was just my problem. If I have one person with a lot of connections and I see a bunch of people I want to talk to and get to know, I can't ask that one person to introduce me to all of those people, right?
No, but you can reach out, to Frank's point, you can reach out to those 10 people that they need to know and say, hey, you know what? You and I share a common connection, Frank, and I'm in this space, would love to have a cup of coffee with you over Zoom.
Is that really how it works? Because I thought the whole idea behind it was that you ask that person to make the introduction for you, because otherwise, since everyone has a gazillion connections on LinkedIn, being a second degree connection is still more or less like being strangers.
I think it's up to you to build a relationship, right? So
I would suggest you look at a book by Keith Ferrari that's titled Never Eat Alone.
Oh, that's a great book.
It will definitely give you great insights on how to network more effectively. And I did a presentation a number of times, how to network impactfully. And that's basically, there are some best practices to it, but at the end of the day, it's what works for you. So I would get exposed to how they did it and then modify it as appropriate to, your situation.
Yeah. Keep in mind, I look at my LinkedIn and I have a healthy LinkedIn number of connections, not 30,000, but healthy number. And I probably get 10 to 15 emails a day kind of spamming or asking me for something because of the groups I'm in. So, it is, I love that book, Never Eat Alone. I think that's great advice. But yeah, it's about relationships. Don't expect to just connect with somebody on LinkedIn and all of a sudden they're going to help you get a job.
My daughter's been coming to the Breakfast Club since she was 4. She just turned 22.
Oh.
She just graduated with her MBA, and she already has 13,000 connections. And when she talks to these different people, they're usually floored that a 22-year-old would have that level of connections. But she did it the right way. And as she was going through her undergrad and her graduate work, you know, she connected to her professor. She connected to her fellow students. She was in the Leadership Honors Program at the school, so she connected to many C-level executives that were alumni and all the participants that were previously Leadership Honors participants. So it's definitely feasible and capable. And if you have your mindset on that of always be networking, always be connecting, you would be surprised as you do this how quickly those relationships will ramp up. But it's a mindset that you need to adopt and, you know, determine, you know, what your goals are and how to apply it correctly. And Keith Ferrari was one who was a principal in one of the big fours. He actually parlayed his networking into getting into Harvard, to going to school for free. I mean, it's an amazing story when you look at how he did it and how critical networking was to his success.
Well said.
I mean, the other kind of concern I have, and this may just be imposter syndrome, I don't know, but like a lot of the people that, you know how you mentioned you get the 15 different connection requests a day, like these people get absolutely bombarded. The ones that I'd be talking to get bombarded by recruiters and random stuff to the point they just don't check their LinkedIn anymore. So,
well, I check it, but ask yourself, who am I responding to, Adam? It's the same thing as your resume. Who am I responding to? I'm responding to the ones who took enough time to look at my LinkedIn profile and find out what's important to me. The ones
Adam, also, why are you desiring to network with that specific individual? Is it a mutual relationship you're trying to develop, or is it just what's in it for me? So if it's just what's in it for me, then you're missing the point of networking to begin with.
Well, but I have nothing to offer people. I'm so early in my career. I can't like.
How could you say that, Adam?
Everybody has something to offer. See,
oh my God,
Adam, you've had a couple of misconceptions, and you're allowing that to be the basis of how it's driving your action.
Yeah.
Well, but like the whole point of networking is
leading
like
people from your network. Networking is a two-way street, and I'll let Alex weigh in on this because Alex usually does a great job on explaining. Is Alex still on?
Alex is no longer on the call.
Okay. Well, basically, you need to know the whole purpose of what having networking is. You're going to meet with someone. You're going to let the conversation take it where the two of you, you know, evolve to. But it's not about what's in it for me. It's about helping the others. In my 20 years of leading this group, I have never taken a penny for helping people, okay? I've done this simply for the altruistic purposes of helping others. And because of that, that's why it's flourished. That's why it's come back to me in so many different ways. It's got to be authentic.
Right.
Well
what I'm
said.
saying is like, on the one hand, well, I mean, this kind of makes me think of another thing. On the one hand, you know, we're saying we're all here because we're in a job search. And on the other hand, it's like, oh, you need to network in order to find jobs. But like, if what we're fundamentally driven by is getting that next score, then how authentic are any of these relationships?
No, over 50% of the people currently on this call are not in a search. That's what I'm trying to tell you. These are people that have gone through it and are actually here to help you and give back. Are you
really?
even aware
Wow.
of that? Yeah.
I had no idea. I thought this was just like a job hunters support group or something where we would all just like sit down and share tips and strategies.
And career management group that's been around for 20 years. And one of the ways that we differentiate ourselves from the rest of the groups is that our alumni remain involved with the group and are there to help. So when you're reaching out to the people in the LinkedIn group, the majority of those people, somewhere over the 20 years, have gone through this and are hiring managers. We have over 9,000 members that have landed through this group. Of our people, about 800 plus are sitting C-level executives that when they have job opportunities, they look to the group first and post them out there. You know, those are the types of things that this group is about. It's not just a bunch of people coming together just to do job search.
Oh, holy cow. Jeez. Thank you. That actually lifts my spirits a lot. Yeah, I had no idea about any of that. I wish that there were like, I don't know, like I mean, this is the one downside of it being online. It's like, man, if there were a brochure, this would have made a lot more sense to me.
There's a website, thebreakfastclubnj.com. Have you looked it over?
Clearly not enough. So thank you. I just don't know like how I would help people. I guess I could teach them how to code. I've done that for a lot of people, but I mean, how relevant is that unless you're trying to get into programming?
Of a millennial, you could help them by sharing the perspective of being a digital native. You know, there's a lot of things. You know, when you're networking, if you put your hands out to each side, you not only reach out to those people that are above you, but those people that you're helping up.
Are you sleepy or are you choking up? Holy cow.
You know, folks, it's 10 o'clock. You know, we're running a little bit long, which is a great discussion. So we may want to think about wrapping up the formal part of the meeting, but we'll keep the session open informally for a discussion a little longer. Jerry, I'm wondering what your thought is on the time as well. Jerry Payton.
I agree, David. I think it's time to wrap up the main presentation and have open networking at this point.
Well, could I ask Colleen one final question?
Of course.
Hi. Is there something that you're looking for now that we might help you with?
You know, we're building our coaching business. We really were trying to really get more people build. You know, I think it's a little bit of everything. You know, we are really trying to build our coaching business right now, but it's something that's been happening very naturally over the last 20 years. You know, it's what happens when you're a leader, I guess. But and we're doing a lot of nonprofit work in the city. So helping young students and interns. So I would love two things. If anyone knows anyone who is, you know, would be interested in coaching, of course, we're interested in that. But more importantly, we have a ton of interns out there that are looking for opportunities. So if anyone in the New York City area is looking for interns, I would love for you to reach out to me so I can make those connections, because there's a lot of great kids who have just don't have the families and support that this group offers, that are just looking for an opportunity to you know, work with someone and figure out what business life is all about. So thank you for that, John. On that note, I really do need to leave, and please, like, if anyone has any questions, or if there's you know, happy to answer any other questions or give advice or whatever it is that you want. My email address is right there. But I'm so thankful for the time today, and it was a fun conversation, and I'm just blown away by this group and its ability to help each other. So thank you. Thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Well, Colleen, thank you so much. It was so special that we've gotten friendly over the past months or year or so. I'm so happy that you're now a supporter of job seekers through these job seeker groups like the Breakfast Club of New Jersey. So thank you for participating. This was a wealth of information, and it was so special that it was also so interactive. We got to talk about what we wanted to talk about, not just what you wanted to introduce to us. And I think that made it extra helpful for a lot of people on the call today. So thank you so much.
Glad. Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward
Thank
to
you,
hearing from all
Colleen.
of you, and thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone. John, look out. I'm on my way. I'm coming for you, John Sampson.
Uh-oh. That was on the
You gotta be
recording.
careful about
Even though you're a Red Sox fan, if you'll take my call. All right, thanks, you guys. Have a great rest of the meeting. Bye bye.
John.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
So while in the Breakfast Club nomenclature, while the room needs to come back and we're running out of coffee and donuts, we'll end the formality of the meeting. Obviously, Colleen just had to go as well. But if you'd like, we'll hang around the room and I will disconnect the recording in just a minute. But I'll just say thanks, everyone, for participating in our Breakfast Club meeting this month. And gee, I'm going to quickly look, or Jerry, if you know who our presenter is next month.
Yes, Ed Hahn.
Oh, terrific. So Ed Hahn will be here. Ed Hahn is a LinkedIn guru, knows a tremendous amount about LinkedIn. Ed is also a recruiter, and we will be having Ed present to us next week. So next month, so something to look forward to. And that's going to be Saturday, August 14th at 8 o'clock in the morning. So until we get to see you either virtually next month or maybe in person, we'll simply say thank you and goodbye, everybody.